Legendary critic Roger Ebert says the plot of this film, summarized, invites parody, but the result is surprisingly effective. Jonathan Rosenbaum of the Chicago Reader disagrees, saying we might as well be watching a blissed-out Bill and Ted caper. And in reviewing its 2015 remake, Marjorie Baumgarten of the Austin Chronicle notes that the original was indeed ludicrous, but it exuded warmth, vitality, and belief in itself. The 2.0 update splashes up on shore, DOA. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Point Break.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters, and welcome to Ruined Childhoods.
That's right, everybody. That guy over there is Dan. I'm John. We're brothers. We're talking about movies, and we're getting jacked and excited. And we're going to talk about what we're going to do in terms of bringing him back as a remake, reboot, prequel, sequel, whatever, what have you. Who knows what it will be. Thank you for listening. And hi, Dan.
If it has to be done, we will find the best possible way to do it.
Yes.
Until somebody else finds a better possible way to do it.
That's right. And just right off the bat, right before we started recording this, we are actually recording this on Sunday, February 13th, and we just saw the news that the legendary director and producer Ivan Reitman has passed away in his mid-70s, young, and the biggest pour one out we possibly can for a true... screen legend, especially of like 90s cinema.
Well, 80s, 90s,
yeah.
Even going back to the 70s. Ivan Reitman,
right.
I mean, this is like any loss is sad, and any loss that's not, I mean, like Betty White, love her, but
right.
We could say like, yes, she lived a long, healthy and happy life, yes, and entertained millions. And Ivan Reitman, I mean, 75 is not exactly young, but it's young, and it's a bit surprising. And I think for us and for those of our generation, Ivan Reitman gave us so much.
Yeah.
Starting even, producing Animal House and the Blues Brothers, and
right. Directing Ghostbusters alone could be,
yes, directing Ghostbusters. Yes, that in and of itself, but also directing Twins, and
Dave,
Kindergarten Cop, Dave.
Yeah,
so many that we've already talked about.
I know, and there's a reason why we've talked about them, is because they are these beloved movies. And I'm so thrilled that, the Reitman dynasty, filmmaking dynasty, continues on.
Yes.
And with the blessing, especially with Ghostbusters Afterlife, Dan, and I don't know if you had seen it, but, the things that Jason Reitman did with that, with Ivan Reitman as well, it's just like a testament to the talents and... I don't know, the enjoyability of the work done by Ivan Reitman. So the biggest pour one out.
The impact of his work on pop culture. You talk about Ghostbusters. You talk about Stripes is another one. You talk about Kindergarten Cop and Twins, Meatballs.
Right.
These are movies that are like in the DNA of movie buffs, especially if you grew up in the 1980s,
yeah,
and 90s. But these are just so a part of our, like our cinematic language.
Yeah.
Are the movies of Ivan Reitman. It's one of those things. So it is Oscar season, and the Academy Award nominations were announced. The week leading up to our recording this. And it's something that I think about often with so many directors from the 1980s who maybe didn't direct or maybe weren't nominated for Academy Awards, but really were like the lifeblood of 80s mainstream movies.
Absolutely.
And like made great. And I think about this with I thought about this with Richard Donner, who we also lost not too long ago. Yeah. John McTiernan is another one
who he lost to the law.
Well, yes. He lost himself. He fought the law and the law won.
Yeah.
But these filmmakers who, despite the lack of awards to their names, certainly their movies have made.
Sure. Well, something that is important to note is that, like, there are, and this is less of a factor back in the 80s and I guess maybe the earlier 90s, but nowadays movies that are intended to be awards contenders usually come out towards the end of the year. They try to get everybody to be fresh in everyone's memories when it comes time to do awards voting. And I don't know if that was exactly the case in the 80s. I don't think so, because you think about a lot of the bigger movies. You're nodding. Does that mean you're nodding yes?
I mean, yes. Look, you always have your outliers. Silence of the Lambs released in February of 1991, but all of the other it's usually like September, October, November, December.
Yeah.
You see
right.
I mean, you've got your summer. There are ones like you're Saving Private Ryan that comes out over the summer, but
but it's the movies that are like the Ivan Reitman movies that come out that get people continuing to come out to see movies. The ones that are maybe mid-budget, that have familiar faces in them. Maybe they're comedies, which, you don't see as much of anymore, really. A lot of those now are maybe straight to streaming. There's just not the same thirst for that kind of thing. But, at the time, Ivan Reitman was bringing people to the theaters during times that were maybe not peak movie-going times. They weren't necessarily the summer blockbuster movies. They weren't necessarily the big Oscar movies.
A lot of his movies came out during Oscar season. Twins and Kindergarten Cop, notably,
right? But they weren't going to be.
Oscars.
They weren't going to be the big contenders. Yeah.
No. They were the movies that the kids went to go see while the parents were going to see Rain Man or whatever.
That's another thing. Yeah, I don't know if I know that was kind of maybe our experience growing up, where it's like, all right, you go see this while we go see this, kind of a thing.
But, and I think it was, and interestingly enough, possibly. That may tie in to today's film. I don't know, but coming back to this, I think there was much more of a concentrated focus on what was coming out in cinemas, in movie theaters back then, and it was kind of like there were a handful of movies that came out, and that those were the ones that everyone went to see, and they're like stars, big actors were much more relied upon to anchor movies. Now it's more, I would say, concepts. Mm-hmm. It's more like, all right, well, let's see. And since so many movies that come out now are, different takes on old ideas or reboots. I'm thinking of the Batman and just how, and it's almost commonplace now. And it's okay, another few years we'll have another Batman, and we'll see how this director does Batman. Mm-hmm. And you know, and that goes for that applies to so many different different genres, but it's so much less about the stars and like like Twins was so much about the premise. Kindergarten Cop was so much about the premise. Ghostbusters is just so out there because it's like, all right, well, let's take the top comedy stars of the day, pair them with like Sigourney Weaver, who, in addition to being an action hero by that point.
You know, I do want to quickly amend that a little bit because I don't think that Harold Ramis was exactly one of the biggest comedy stars at the time.
But he was a star in the comedy world, even though his work was more behind the scenes.
Right, yeah.
But look...
I mean, with Stripes, yeah, of course, but...
Well, he directed Caddyshack.
But not a lot of people at the time were probably just like, oh, the guy who directed Caddyshack is in this.
No. Look. Harold Ramis was not the name. Like, you know, if they were choosing which names to the names that have the larger font size on the poster are not like Harold Ramis and Ernie Hudson. Not even Rick Moranis at that point.
Who, by the way, is just over my shoulder. Dan, I don't know if you can see
Vince Clortho. Yeah. So
I hung some artwork this past few days.
I mean, but yeah, Ghostbusters was just kind of revolutionary because it was and of course, like, you know, Aykroyd and Ramis wrote it, but it was taking these top comedians and putting them in the context of a supernatural. I mean, it would be a supernatural thriller if you just took the story and didn't have the script or the actors. It would just be straight up supernatural thriller.
Yeah, and just another note about Ghostbusters, and then we'll move on from this tribute to the...
But we just found out.
I know. But just one other thing is, like, as we are talking about Ghostbusters, and we're talking about the actors in it, and we're talking about, you know, the people behind it, what's going through my head is the score. Dun, 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 dun. Like, just those little things are just so fresh, and you know, they cling onto your spinal cord and just attach themselves into your psyche a little bit.
It's one of those movies where it's just like the stars aligned, both literally and figuratively. Well, figuratively, or their schedules aligned at least, and it's the type of thing that, like, yes, you could do sequels, but it's like you're never gonna, like, that's a once in a lifetime type of movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ivan Reitman was certainly a once in a lifetime filmmaker, and he will be missed, but his legacy is firmly in place.
And one other thing that I want to note about Ivan Reitman is that, at least for me, for quite a while, I kind of linked him, and I think this is because of Animal House, and they kind of went down they started in the same core and kind of went down in different directions, and, you know, as time went on, they kind of detached from each other more and more. But I think about him and I think about John Landis, and I feel like they both have these really interesting, you know, filmographies, and, you know, they're known for, you know, having this start with like Animal House and stuff like that. But like, you know, people don't have a lot of really good things to say about the character of John Landis, whereas Ivan Reitman, I don't think I've heard a negative thing about him personality wise, and I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I think he's got I think like his reputation as just a genuinely good person is firmly in place. Oh, you know what, John? So first of all, I misspoke earlier. He was not involved in Blues Brothers. because there's a
Right.
whole thing about the different path that the Animal House, like the Animal House crew basically divided, and like some went on to Caddyshack and some went on to Blues Brothers, and it was like a whole the Chris Nashawati Caddyshack book talks about that. But I will say, we were, before we went on, we were thinking, oh man, like, can we do do we have an Ivan Reitman movie that we can do?
Yeah.
And
Right, because we are in February, our celebration of the films involving the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And as it just so happens, Ivan Reitman is credited as an executive producer on the last film we talked about, Feds.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remembered seeing his name in the credits too. Interesting.
Yep. So very tangentially involved
There you go.
there. But yes. I'm sure, like, I look at his filmography and how many of his movies we've already done. So
Oh
but
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, when I was thinking about like, was there a Kindergarten Cop FBI tie? And it's like, well, we already did it. So like,
Kindergarten
whatever.
Cop 2.
Yeah, Kindergarten Up 2 is FBI. Yeah, that's right. In that weird like FBI field office. Anyway,
Yeah.
I want to talk about another thing that's in the news, and you know, there would have been a better segue had I gotten to this sooner. But we were talking about directors who get nominated for Oscars, and this past year there were two directors who it is the opinion of I believe it was Josh Brolin who said that Denis Villeneuve was snubbed for directing Dune and not getting an Oscar nomination for that. And there was a director who came out with two very big movies this year, Ridley Scott with House of Gucci and The Last Duel. Not to say that I think that either of those deserved for him to have gotten a Best Directing nomination, but still a very like high caliber director pumping out two giant movies in 1 year. It's kind of it's just an impressive feat. And I bring this up because it was announced that Amazon is bringing Blade Runner to the small screen. Although these screens these days, they're not small. But to I think it's Blade Runner 2099 is
Yes.
going to be the series. And yeah, so that's interesting. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it, what the style is going to be like. I mean, Dan, you've seen Blade Runner 2049, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
It's
Yes.
fantastic. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
That was definitely in that run of like Harrison Ford bringing back old characters,
I would say that the on the higher quality end of that
Absolutely.
little subgenre.
Absolutely. And
Did he do any others other than Indiana? Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right. Star Wars, and I mean, man, they should get him back for another Jack Ryan.
Maybe once we cover a Jack Ryan movie, I mean, I think
We'll
that
do the Clancy verse.
was he FBI or was that NSA, CIA? CIA. Yeah.
He was
that's
CIA.
right. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a thing that's going to be happening. Blade Runner 2099. So 50 years after, I mean, if you do the math, of course, 50 years after the events of Blade Runner 2049. And Blade Runner 2049 is one that I saw one time and I would love to watch it again, but I've always been in a situation where I'm like, right, but I want to wait till I have a better like sound system. You know,
Right.
like I want to make sure that it's going to be in a situation where it's going to look and sound as good as possible. So
Like I
that
just
might
want to
be
once I
that
can
might be
invest,
a Blu-ray purchase for me.
once I can invest in my own IMAX theater.
Yeah.
That's I think the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, thinking about it now, I announced this on the last episode. I've got this new job that I'm about to start where I could kind of make this stuff happen. Not IMAX, but like
No, but you could have a screening of
I could definitely do a screening of Blade Runner 2049 and, make a whole thing of it.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
So,
wait.
Dan,
Yeah.
it is February. We are talking about movies involving the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've talked about The Silence of the Lambs. We've talked about Feds. And now we're talking about Point Break. Point Break. Dan, what is your past experience with Point Break?
I first saw Point Break in theaters in the summer of 1991. It would have been in later summer of 1991 because it was during one of our annual trips to Sea Island, Georgia.
Okay.
And I remember that's why I said I'm not sure if this was a movie where like you and Scott went into something else, and then our family friend who's about a little bit older than I am, Pam, we went to Point Break.
Okay, so if was this in Georgia? Or was
Yes.
this okay? Because
No,
I
this
have
was
a
in
movie going memory that took place in a hotel on the way to Georgia,
Yeah.
which I hope
no.
to talk about that sometime in the near future on another episode. I don't want to give away too much information because we might cover this movie.
I do think I remember most of the movies that we saw at that theater.
Okay,
The one in the mall.
the one that was like in a mall, like attached to the hotel. Am I remembering that right? Okay.
Yes. No. Yes. It was the greatest place on earth for us at the time. And it was somewhere in like North Carolina or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, no, this was if I remember correctly, it was a small theater. It was like a small theater. It was like probably like a second run theater in a strip mall. So it's like it was just like one of those kind of like classic theaters that they really are. There really aren't that many of them around anymore.
Anybody who's listened to past episodes of the Ruined Childhoods podcast will understand and not be surprised by the fact that on a family vacation to a beach resort, we went to the movies.
It was raining. It was raining.
I mean, yeah, of course it was raining.
Not that in this,
it wouldn't have stopped us.
Not that would have made a difference. No.
But
we usually
how
didn't.
appropriate that this movie begins and ends in the rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And
it actually ends in Oregon. I mean, it's supposed to be Australia, but it's shot in Oregon, where I am right now.
Ah, yes. Yeah. So I remember seeing it, and I remember it was like I liked it. It definitely grew on me as the years went by, but I remembered feeling that it was much like a grittier action movie than I was accustomed to at the tender young age of 13, going on 14. But a lot grittier, especially the scenes with like there's the gang of neo-Nazis that we encounter, and during the shootout at the neo-Nazis' house, that one stuck out really vividly to me, just because there was so much. It just seemed so just filthy and
right. Yeah. I'm going to do a little synopsis and then we'll get into it. I will add, though, that this was not the first time that I saw it, but I did see it in the theater. I saw it at the Alamo Drafthouse in Austin many years ago, but it was like a midnight showing, and I definitely dozed off in the middle. Not because it is the kind of movie where you doze off, but I think I was just like really beat. I think I just did a lot of traveling that day. So here's a little synopsis, and I kept it short because this is one where, like, as soon as you crack it open, you can really just start like blah, 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 blah talking. Former college quarterback turned FBI special agent Johnny Utah is partnered up with old-timer wildcard Angelo Pappas to take down a group of bank robbers who call themselves the ex-presidents. Working off of Pappas's theory that they're surfers, Utah goes deep undercover to find and take down the criminals. But after he gets in too deep and finds his identity from within the ethos of ex-president's leader, Bodie, Johnny Utah has to decide whether or not to take them down or to continue to live by their code. It's, there's a lot more that you can kind of really say, and I feel like framing it that way kind of
Yes.
oversimplifies it. But it is one of those movies, and like you said, a gritty action movie directed by the amazing Catherine Bigelow, and I am just so enamored by what she did with such a simple story of, rookie FBI agent has to find some bank robbers, but gets in too deep.
Yeah.
And there's so much that they do that pays itself off. The characters are, multi-layered. I mean, you think about now that there's a character who goes by the name Bodhi, who's kind of this just like guru guy, but the way that Patrick Swayze plays him is just like you understand him, and you almost at times feel for him, and you want to just like him and like him and like him. I mean, it helps that it's Patrick Swayze. And
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean, just such an incredible force. And of course, Keanu Reeves plays Johnny Utah in his first action movie, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First action movie up until this point, it was comedies and art house fare for Keanu, and this was his first foray into action.
Well, this year alone was Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and My Own Private Idaho.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
what a triple threat.
Really, I mean, quite a
Get you a man who can do all three in one
So-
year.
Well, hey, it's Keanu, right? But going back to what you were saying about Bodhi, about Patrick Swayze's character,
Yeah.
Bodhi, in watching, in watching it again and thinking about Bodhi, and also thinking about Bodhi's relationship with Tyler, played
Lori
by Lori
Petty.
Petty,
Mm-hmm.
who she says, she had lost her parents in a plane crash when she was young, and she's found herself kind of living at the beach and being part of this crew, kind of part of this crew, and being Bodhi's lover, part-time
Yeah.
lover to
Former lover. Yeah.
yeah, and it reminded me so much of Charles Manson, and how Charles Manson would hang around the beach and would talk about these spiritual things, and would talk to young women very much like Tyler, and give them these young women who felt like they didn't they didn't fit in, they were runaways, their parents didn't understand them, and Manson would tell them and talk to them and say things that made a lot of sense, because he took logic the same way Bodhi kind of talks about it and uses the logic partially of kind of that stealing from the rich almost, but he's very Manson-esque, where he preaches this peace and love, but then is involved in crime, and really, aside from the part that that he does get involved in the break-ins, and he does come in to the break-ins, he only shoots one person,
Right.
During the story, and he talks about how he hates violence, and he has other people in his gang that don't have an aversion to violence,
Yeah.
to do which was so much Manson, who convinced others to commit crimes and commit violent crimes on his behalf. Charles Manson, I think, is to the best of anyone's knowledge, never actually killed anybody.
He okay.
Directly.
I believe it was before the main murders that we all know about. I believe that he shot somebody who I don't know the full story or remember everything exactly, but there was somebody who came to Spawn Ranch or something, and I think that he killed them in order to try and incite a race riot. It was a black somebody who was black, that he was trying to get there to be a cop. I don't know.
Well, that was his whole thing, and not to get off on a Manson tangent, but I don't know. I question that. I get a lot of my information from reading Helter Skelter. So
right. I think that what I remember is from listening to the Charles Manson season of You Must Remember This, which was like the podcast called You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's brilliant, well-researched podcast series. And there was one season that was all about Charles Manson. And I haven't listened to it in years, but it was just mind-blowing. And yeah. So anyway, I believe that he killed that one person, but he had everybody else.
Then he and Bodhi are the
They're
scores
tied.
even.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bodhi very much reminded me of Manson, particularly.
That's a really good point. That's interesting. I hadn't considered that.
It didn't hit me until this latest viewing, and really it was thinking about the Tyler relationship and how would she end up with him, and kind of mixed up because she also doesn't seem to be aware that he's a bank robber.
No. Yeah. I wanted to also just talk a little bit about the difference between the times that I've viewed this movie and how they affected me differently. Because I feel like watching it this past week, I'm certainly watching it with a more analytical eye since we're talking about it on the podcast, and really absorbing all of the things that work so well about this movie, especially having to do with the direction. And the performances are amazing. I mean, I'd say this is probably, for me, Gary Busey's best performance. He's a total character, but like it works so well. And yeah, he says completely bananas things, but like it's awesome. And I absolutely love the way that he and Keanu Reeves bounce off of each other, because there's definitely this like hesitancy on both of their parts at different times, but there's a respect that goes into it as well. So I noticed that. I also noticed that, and I want to say this probably has a lot to do with Catherine Bigelow's perspective on machismo. And, this movie is very much a, boys doing boy things kind of a movie.
Kind of a bromance.
It's a very twisted bromance. But I wanted to I'm going to play the clip of the scene where they're playing football, because I was watching it this time differently than I'd watched it before. And it's funny to watch it thinking about another like action movie that has like a random sports scene like Top Gun, where in that one it's just all to music, but this one you hear the sounds they're making, and they're these very animalistic sounds. I'm just going to play that really quick.
Ready, set, push,
Whose ball is this? Who works here?
So I wanted to point out that the only voice that you hear saying words is Lori Petty, is Tyler. It's the only woman that's playing.
Wow.
It's the only one who's actually saying words. The rest of them are just grunting and making animal noises.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, I definitely noticed when I was watching the animalisticness of it, like everything from from Johnny chasing Bodhi, like, and tackling him into the waves.
Oh, yeah.
To like how hard they're hitting, and they're barely playing with clothes on, much less padding. But yeah, right. They're very animalistic, and yeah, Tyler, the only one to actually speak using English, using language.
Words. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Using the English language.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's something that I hadn't picked up on until I was watching it this time, and I was just so admirable of those little decisions that had to have been intentional. There had to have been the kind of thing where it's like, don't talk to each other, just make noises.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And, going back to what you were saying about this being just such a grittier action movie, and a lot of that also has to do with the very specific costuming and the way that the actors portrayed the ex-presidents, when they became these bank robbing people, like how they acted during the bank robberies. And you see a lot of movies where they're, if you're talking about other bank robbery movies, and you think about, I mean, there's movies like Baby Driver or The Town, or, where they kind of do this ex-president's thing, wearing the rubber masks and stuff like that. There's something about what they do in Point Break that's really fascinating, where it goes to the close-ups of of Bodhi's eyes through the mask. And, the mouth of the mask like moves as he's talking. And there's just something about it that's just like, there's one point where he like sticks his tongue out of the mouth slit of the mask. And like, there's just something that's really cool about that. And it makes it very effective. And then there's the entire chase sequence. And I was watching this and I was like, this has to be my favorite chase in all of cinema, when Johnny Utah is chasing Bodhi, still wearing the Ronald Reagan mask and the tux and everything. He doesn't take the mask off, and they're running through. There's that part where they ditch the car, and he turns the gas station pump into a flamethrower. And you just kind of see that in slow motion.
You see his face through the flames.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. And it's during this chase sequence. And I was just in awe watching it this time. And just really appreciative of the care that was put into what could have easily been something that was brushed off a little bit.
And think about the part of the chase it's on foot, and it's Utah's chasing Bodhi, and through those really narrow alleyways, and like when Bodhi has to runs into that person's house, and like throws the dog at Utah, and it's so, there's parts where it's so confining, and I think I remember reading something about like how they develop, like what they did, and like the certain type of like the camera and the way that the camera operator kind of had to like was following them. And it just sounds like really, really wonderful. It's one of the sequences in this movie, one of the many sequences in this movie that made me really appreciate just the way that movies used to be made. Right. And like you could draw a line from this to The French Connection, and the car chase scenes in The French Connection, but also like not just those sequences, but the quieter sequences and the sequences where tension really builds. The scene, the aforementioned raid on the neo-Nazis that they suspect that those are Utah's first suspects.
Sure.
Including Red Hot Chili Peppers singer Anthony Kiedis.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene, the tension to it builds, even from Johnny being late to his own
Well, up until the end, when Johnny is being held face against a moving lawnmower, and oh my goodness, I was at the edge of I've seen this movie 20 times. I was at the edge of my seat.
Yes.
And just like freaking out because I was like, oh my God.
But the whole
That
build
is-
up
yeah.
from the lawnmower going on as they're standing outside and they building up the tension. Pappas is at the front door
Right.
asking about the dog.
And because the lawnmower's on, you can't hear the radios. And
Right. Right. And all of this miscommunication, and it builds, the tension builds to the point where you're like, oh my God, every second that goes by, the worse it is going to get. And yeah, it's pretty
Right.
bad.
Yeah, it's
It's brutal.
I feel like we're kind of dancing all over the place with this one, but I kind of don't mind. It's
Well, no,
it's one of those
yeah.
movies that like you could just, as soon as you start talking about it, you start thinking about other things that are just so incredible about it. Like, we're talking about the chase sequence. There's an entire chase that happens mid-air that happens while they're falling from an airplane. Johnny Utah, without a parachute, dives down to catch Bodhi, holding a gun up against him, but he's just like, the only way you can open up the chute is if you drop the gun. Oh, it's so good.
Is that the one that's because they already know he's a cop then, take him up in the plane.
That was the second jump. The first jump, they also
right.
They also knew that he was an FBI agent, but
He has a pack in the first.
Yeah. And actually, I want to play a clip. This is after the chase sequence where they find out that Johnny Utah is a federal agent, and they're trying to figure out, what do we do about Johnny Utah?
You act like nothing happened.
Relax, Nathaniel.
Don't tell me to relax, Bodhi! He's a fucking federal agent! Should have shot him when I had the chance. I'll deal with that fucking cop.
No, Rosie. Do you realize that we have hit 30 banks in 3 years and they haven't been able to touch us? And all this does is up the stakes of the game.
Fuck the stakes, Bodhi! I mean, the only person this is a game to is you, man. This is real. I mean, this is serious shit, and I am scared, okay? So I say we get the fuck out of here now, tonight, okay?
You run, you die.
Come on, think about it. This was never about money for us. It was about us against the system. That system that kills the human spirit. We stand for something. To those dead souls inching along the freeways in their metal coffins, we show them that the human spirit is still alive. So you trust me? Okay. Then don't worry about this guy. I know exactly what to do with him.
Yeah, and then the next morning, they pick him up from his place. Over the course of the night, orchestrated this entire kidnapping thing with Tyler, and they take him up in an airplane and kind of give him this incredible life-altering experience where, he knows that they know who he is. But they're doing this thing where it's just all about experiencing something together and feeling this giant rush and feeling this sense of camaraderie, reconnecting him to who he thought that they were.
Do you think Bodhi's trying to turn him in that sequence?
I think that he's trying to, I think that he's already kind of turned him and he kind of knows it, but it's really just the idea of this isn't just our enemy. This is somebody who, even though we know the truth about him, you can't deny who he turned out to be during that course of time that we were spending with him. And you can
Him
see
being Johnny?
him being Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could see that Johnny has had this transformation in his personality because he's only 25?
Yeah.
He's still very young, they probably know he can't be that far into, the FBI. Bodhi already knows that he was like a college football star. Like he already knows like who this guy is. And I think that he had some faith in him, that because also keep in mind that at the end of that like super epic chase sequence, Johnny Utah has the shot at Bodhi, but doesn't take it. He has the opportunity
Famously.
to shoot him and kill him, but he can't do it. So he points the gun up in the air and squeezes the trigger.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where Bodhi is just like, there's something that we got to do to get him to reconnect, because, you know, we have a chance here. And unfortunately, they do have to take Tyler hostage and in order the insurance policy. And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a perfect moment, really.
Well, and one of the many just like, you know, great factors of this script is the setup of him having a bad knee, so that when he is chasing Bodhi and falls, it's his bad knee that gives out.
And that's the thing. That's what I said. These things that pay themselves off that you don't expect to, they just work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. It's just so good and so well done, and it's why watching it today after also in the last several hours watching the 2015 Point Break that I hesitate to refer to as a remake.
It is a, dare I say, spiritual remake?
I mean, look, let's be honest. The Fast and the Furious is more of a remake of Point Break than the remake of Point Break.
You want to talk about Fast and the Furious? We can talk about Fast and the Furious. They are... Fast and the Furious is a remake of Point Break to the moment where the FBI agent goes to talk to the woman in order to connect him to the people, and she's working at like a sandwich counter in both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting is the Point Break remake is much more like a Fast and the Furious Presents movie.
Well, it's all about extreme sports. It's capitalizing on a subculture, which Point Break did as well. I mean, the surfing community is definitely a subculture. And in 1991 was certainly like more of a thing than maybe it would be now. But yeah, the extreme sports subculture, the whole like do mindset.
You know what's funny? You said that. One of my notes is this is a Mountain Dew commercial with a 2-hour runtime.
Yeah,
it is. I'm sorry. I need to go on a rant for a moment.
All right.
I'm just gonna
commence.
Were you gonna go on were you gonna do a synopsis of the remake?
No, I didn't write down a synopsis of the remake, but it's essentially, well, do you need me to give any information? And all this would be based on only just remembering from watching it in a hotel room.
Okay.
Several years ago.
I'm gonna throw this out there. So first of all, Johnny Utah is not actually named Johnny Utah. That's a nickname apparently in this, which I'm like, oh no, that wasn't Strike One. Strike One was he's a thrill seeker from the beginning. He's this like big famous extreme athlete. He's being played by the less charismatic, like genetic leftover material twin brother of John Cena. And it's like and then from the beginning, it's like, wait a second, is this a remake of Cliffhanger? Because like his friend dies, they're doing this like extreme bike jumps, and his friend dies, and so I don't know, he's sad, and then he ends up in the FBI 7 years later, and he gets it right away. Like right away, they're like, oh, so there's these, this group of it's international now. And there's this group of international thieves, and this is where it's a little bit more Rob from the Rich and give to the poor, whereas
Right.
in the original it's they rob banks to kind of fund their
Endless Summer.
travels. Right. They don't have a sponsor as they do in the remake. They've got this sponsor, and Bodhi is he's Venezuelan, and there's no explanation of why he's called Bodhi. He just is. And you've got Pappas, but in this he's Ray Winstone. He's like an Interpol agent, who he's not like. What I like about Pappas in the original is that in the first scene you meet him when they're doing the swimming pool, training exercises,
Blindfolded, finding the bricks.
and he just kind of like leaps into the pool like he's at a pool party. You get the sense, all right, this guy's wild. It's also in the original Point Break, it's Pappas's theory that they're surfers.
Right. And everyone makes fun of him for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you like Utah's kind of going along with it, reluctantly. Whereas in this, it's like he watches a video and he's like, they're extreme athletes. I know this because I'm an extreme athlete. And makes a whole like presentation where there's like a promo video of him playing in the background. It's ridiculous. And then, Utah almost drowns. Bodhi saves him in this one. Then there's one part where he goes in, there's like the Tyler in this one. Her name isn't Tyler, and she looks like she doesn't stick out. Like Lori Petty was sexy in this, different type of way. Like there weren't other actresses, there weren't other like female lead actresses out there who were that like Lori Petty, who had that Lori Petty quality to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was so perfect.
She was authentic.
Very authentic.
Yeah. And everything about her was completely believable. She had a job. She had a life. She just happened to like surfing and got involved with these guys. Whereas the equivalent in the 2015 was kind of just part of she wasn't stealing anything from anybody, but
she was part of the crew. No, she's part of the crew.
She was? I don't remember.
She's part of the crew because he fights her. I'm sorry. I'm going to give shit away about this because honestly, like, unless you really want to see how little effort they like the creative team, and I'm not saying, I know we say there are no bad movies and people worked. You say that.
But I'm also going to say this just really quick. If you want to watch a movie that shows a lot of really cool extreme sports like things that happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you just want to enjoy watching those things, you can skip past all the story stuff and see them flying with those like squirrel suits through.
You don't have to skip a damn thing because there's barely any scenes in between.
Oh,
you can get up and take a piss.
There's
maybe
the scene, right during like where they're like having the little like club scene on a yacht or whatever it is, and
yeah, but even then it's like when they go swimming and they're like mer people, they're underwater for like 2 minutes, like swimming. Johnny Utah and whatever the non-Tyler
we can just call her Tyler. It's fine.
Yeah, her name is Samara or something like that in this, and yeah, it's like I'm looking at, they do replicate the firing into the air scene, which is just makes it even better. Yeah, the scenes are cool. Like the flying scene where they're in the squirrel suits, is cool. Like, but it's one after the other, and that's why. And they start so extreme that there's really nowhere to go. Whereas in Point Break, which is so much more grounded in reality, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's not just one like crazy action sequence after the other. It's an extreme sports highlight reel.
Well, also the crazy action sequences take place in people's backyards in narrow alleyways,
right?
And in a not fancy looking part of LA.
Yeah. What's also weird is it's like, and I mean, I'm not a surfer, but I imagine that the term Point Break is actually a surfing term.
Sure. So the title of the movie Point Break, it wasn't originally Point Break. It was like Johnny Utah or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they were just like, let's see if there's a surfing term that sounds cool. And they saw Point Break and we're just like, let's call it Point Break. And it works. You don't think about it for a second, but it works.
No. And they say it, and it works on multiple levels. And like he does say it in the movie, referencing the waves at a certain location.
Yeah. The
They
Point Break
say
there
it-
is really sick, like something like that.
Yeah, like bitchin' Point Break. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the second one, they say it, but it's not as a term.
Should we play the clip?
Yes.
That's the summit. Half a mile of pure primordial rock. Maybe I should have asked you this before, but you've done this, right?
Sure. Except it was out of a plane.
Proximity flight's a whole different monster. You need to read the flow. Become the wind.
Or you'll hit your point. What point? The point where you break. The fear becomes master, and you're its slave.
A man who pushes his boundaries ultimately finds them.
So basically you're saying I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die. The only question's how.
So it's like trying to sound so deep, where I feel like in the original, Bodhi and his buddies, they talk a big game about like why they do what they do, but there's something about Patrick Swayze's charisma that makes you like kind of fall for it. Like as an audience member, you're kind of just like like there's just something about the way that he is that character that draws you in. Whereas the actors in the 2015 remake, they're just trying to deliver the line in a really dramatic way.
But some of the lines are written so so poorly. The scene when the non-Tyler explains how she got connected with Bodhi is so like the last thing you want to laugh at is someone telling the
You wanna
story
hear
of
it?
when they're yes, please.
Everybody leave?
Yeah, mostly. Are you okay?
I don't know. Thinking about losing Chowder. If any of this party is what Ozagi had in mind for the path to enlightenment.
Zaki would have hated this. He only cared about the purity of the eight and giving back whatever he took from the earth on the way to getting there.
And what did he give back?
Sometimes it was as simple as planting a tree. Other times it was something much larger. Like when my parents died in an avalanche when I was 9, he gave me a home.
I didn't know. I'm sorry. And then he died. Questing his third ordeal.
That's the story, but it's not the truth. He completed that ordeal. He could have finished the entire 8. He was that good. But instead, he got himself killed giving back for that ordeal.
Oh.
He positioned his small boat in the North Atlantic between a Norwegian whaling ship and a pod of humpback whales. The whaling ship never even slowed.
So,
Oh, I didn't know if you were gonna have. We don't want to play too long of a clip,
right.
but a moment after that is another one of my favorite exchanges
Oh, no.
in the movie. When they're talking about, like, you know, it's this guy who's like, you know, the spiritual master that Bodhi's like following in his footsteps, and Utah goes, he says something about like ideas can be powerful, and she responds, not as powerful as a whaling ship. Like there's some great like the 2015 Point Break could potentially be like a midnight movie and you would not fall asleep.
So yeah, right. Okay. I have a few things to add about this. Okay, so this Izaki character, yes, Bodhi is doing all of these things that he's doing in order to fulfill these like 8 stunts or whatever that are supposed to bring you some sort of spiritual enlightenment or whatever, and give back to the earth. I think that the whole idea is that that Bodhi wants to leave the earth. It's essentially like, leave it better than you found it. You know, like instead of like taking all the resources from the earth, like giving back to it.
He's definitely got more altruistic purposes in the remake.
Oh, for sure. And I don't know, like that whole thing, it's like nowadays we need for there to be this like much bigger reason why these people are committing crimes. And I don't know if that's just so that we like them more, but they seem to be pretty like eye-rolly people to begin with. And the thing about this movie, the 2015 remake, that is very different from the 1991 version is that the 2015 remake is modeling its script based on action movies from the 90s. Whereas action movies from the 90s are kind of like inventing things on their own. And I say the 90s, meaning also like late 80s, early 90s. Whereas like, you know, the action movies that, you know, have come before were definitely more of a slow burn in, you know, we talk about, you know, things like The French Connection, which I don't even know if you'd call that really an action movie. It has a notable chase sequence.
Drama.
It's a crime drama, but it's, you know, but you talk about other action movies from before this time that were maybe meant to be taken more seriously. There's
Lethal Weapon.
Right, but that's not even like that much longer before this, but that is still one of them where it's kind of like inventing itself. And I would venture to say that like the 1991 Point Break isn't looking to something like Lethal Weapon or, you know, some other like 80s action movie as like a template or like something to build off of. Whereas a movie from 2015, it's people who are writing the script who grew up watching those movies from the 80s and 90s and trying to build on them and make them bigger. And I think that that's where it really fails because they're not trying to do something new. They're trying, and this is not to say that it's necessarily because it's a remake, but they're not necessarily trying to do something new. They're trying to take a formula and like, I don't know, boost it up.
I kind of question that.
Okay.
I felt like, first of all, I felt like the tone, if anything, like short of a like Fast and Furious Presents type thing, had the tone of like early 2000s Jerry Bruckheimer. And I don't know, like I felt like this couldn't have been written by fans of the original because it shows little to no respect.
I didn't say fans. What, just really quick, what I mean is people who watch those movies and see them just for the action of them and not for the craft behind them.
Okay, yes, that makes much more sense. I would say, like, if anything, like, you know, it's you know, you have a writer and you give them, like, this wasn't a passion project. It was more just like someone threw them a Blu-ray of Point Break and said, hey, we want to, like, let's do something. We want to do something with this. But then it's like, if you're, there's no imagination in it. It's very much just like it's action sequence after action sequence. With less than 10 minutes after the flying scene, the fucking flying scene, there's the snowboarding scene.
Yeah.
And then there's like they break, and what they break for isn't dialogue that builds. Yes, there is no point to that break. It's like they stop they barely stop, and it's it was just no. It was no good, and it wasn't like fun, and there were like tiny little nods to the original, but not nearly enough.
It's right, and there's definitely like a congeniality from the 2015 one in reference to the 1991 original that you can tell they definitely missed. That they missed the whole idea behind it.
Huge miss.
Yeah. And anyway, I just wanted to I don't know. I feel like we should completely just move on from the 2015 remake. It is complete nonsense. There's so many things that you could find wrong with it. But like I said, if you just want to see some cool looking shit, the thing is, like, it's a Hollywooded version of it, so it's not like you're seeing like actual people.
Just go on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Just yeah, but don't look up clips for the movie. Look up actual people in squirrel suits or whatever. Yeah. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
And you know, going back to what we were saying about the Fast and the Furious being a remake, yes, it very much is. The Fast and the Furious is about a rookie FBI agent who gets in too close with a group of they're stealing DVD players. Like that's what they're doing.
Because it was 2001.
Because it was 2001, and he gets in too close with them, and then similarly to the 1991 Point Break, at the end he lets the guy go. And, as we have seen over the course of the next billion movies, he is then part of them. Whereas, Johnny Utah, you see him throwing away his badge at the end of Point Break. He gets into this whole thing where like he catches Bodhi after a year, whatever it is, of searching for him, finding him at this 50-year wave that Bodhi accurately predicted, by the way, in Australia. And it's like he is there to get him. He handcuffs himself to him. But for some reason, there's just something about him. He can't squeeze the trigger pointing in the direction. He lets him go, and he, fires a gun into the air. He just lets him go, and he is then at peace with it. And, credit where credit is due. Keanu Reeves totally killing it in this performance. Patrick Swayze, I'd say my favorite of his performances. And
really,
and honestly, it's like, leading up to this, you have, well, of course, Dirty Dancing, but also like Roadhouse. You've got Ghost. You have these, this massive amount of range from this guy. And what I also appreciate about him is that, you think about Patrick Swayze as being this just like, solid, like man's man kind of grunting football player kind of thing. But then you look at the movies that he's in, and he's got so much soul to him. You see him in like The Outsiders, and, you even see him in this movie, and he's got like a surfer's body. He's not like bulked up beyond belief.
No.
He looks like just like a fit guy who just kind of gets it. And
even in Roadhouse, he's very spiritual.
In Roadhouse, he is. Yeah, he doesn't want to be ripping throats out, but you got to do what you got to do.
Well, you have to, be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's just so much about Patrick Swayze that I feel like, I mean, pour one out, Patrick Swayze.
Talk about Gone Too Soon.
Gone Too Soon, but also it's like, after Point Break, aside from To Wong Fu, there, really no big hits. Unless you count Donnie Darko, but that's not like a Patrick Swayze movie. He's in it.
No, it was like an outlier. It was like,
total outlier.
Patrick Swayze. But yeah, we didn't appreciate. I don't think we appreciate what we had with Patrick Swayze. until it was too late.
Yeah, because I feel like there was a consideration of him being more of like a himbo than an actor who truly was able to like capture the essence of a character. And you know, I certainly am fond of the movie To Wong Fu. I'd be interested in watching it. I mean, I did watch it again recently, but like watching it, you know, with somebody who maybe knows a little bit more about, you know, it's hard to call them actual drag queens because they live as women. So that's not what a drag queen is. So I, you know, to kind of watch it with the lens of somebody that, you know, can actually dissect who these characters are and things like that. But like, he was great in that. But it's a very, very, very different atmosphere from a movie like this or Roadhouse or Ghost or, you know. So
yeah, well, that was the whole marketing. I mean, with To Wong Fu is that it was like Patrick Swayze and Wesley Snipes who were known for their action films.
Yeah, I know.
And John Leguizamo, who was breaking out.
Yeah, John Leguizamo was great in that movie too.
Yeah.
So anyway, Patrick Swayze definitely taken from us too soon, and didn't appreciate him when he should have been appreciated more. I would have loved to have seen more from him in this kind of role.
We missed out.
Yeah.
We missed out.
Yeah.
He was fabulous.
So, oh yeah, I was talking about the Fast and the Furious. It is exactly what a remake of this movie should have been. I'm glad that it wasn't a actual remake, that it wasn't like called like Point Break or anything like that.
Well,
but
it was Point Break with cars, the same way like Speed was Die Hard on a bus.
Right, yeah, but it's like this, but I don't know, Fast and the Furious just really took so much from this. And I'm glad that Fast and the Furious had multiple opportunities to reinvent itself, to find its footing after the fourth or fifth movie and become what it is now, which is just like, oh my God, who would have thought that it would have come from this like Point Break ripoff, essentially.
I know. It's crazy. And 20 years. The ninth one came out last year, or 20th anniversary.
Yeah, if you're not counting
the first.
Fast and the Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw.
Or Fast and the Furious presents Point Break.
Right. Or just the Fast and the Furious, all of the TV shows, the animated series and stuff like that. Like, it's wild. And, you know, I don't think that you would have had any of that had it not been for Point Break.
You sure wouldn't, John.
Yeah.
You sure wouldn't.
So, Dan, what would you do?
Well, let's see. Okay, so we tried the remake route. That didn't work out so well. There's a live theatrical experience, Point Break Live, where an audience member gets to play Johnny Utah. Now, what I have read is that the original screenwriter of Point Break, I navigated away from my page, so I lost his name.
Yeah, W. Peter Lilith?
Yes.
Is that right?
Sure. Apparently he was working on a series that would be about Johnny Utah's daughter.
Oh.
Who has grown up and come through some hard times, and now is in the so kind of like a similar story, but then also the mystery of where is Johnny Utah, and is he still alive, and you know, where is he, what is he doing, which that kind of ties into my idea or my thought for a sequel, which is it's challenging. It's tough. The idea of a sequel to Point Break without Patrick Swayze is a little tough to swallow, but it's been all this time. The ending of the original, now, even though James Cameron, who uncredited, but did work on the script, was married to Catherine Bigelow when she made this, but according to him, Bodhi does not survive. at the end.
Right.
But it's not, and you're definitely left to draw that conclusion, but it's not defined for us. So I feel like you could have a Johnny Utah who has, maybe he's spent the last 30 years, like roaming. He quits the Bureau, so who knows what he's doing. And maybe he feels like Bodhi is still out there. He feels his presence and he's obsessed. He needs to find him. Now, within this sequel, I feel like there should be flashbacks to Bodhi's childhood and to show the coming of age
Baby
of Bodhi. I would
Bodhi
call
babies.
it. So yeah, there you go. Done. That's it. I don't think a full prequel about
Wait,
Bodhi's
is that what you would have called it?
Bodhi babies?
Yeah.
No.
Because you started to say, I would call it, and then...
No, I'd call it Point Break: The Spirit of Bodhi.
Okay.
It's not the best title in the world, but
Bodhi Babies
still,
is better.
Still in development. I don't think that a full prequel about Bodhi's like childhood upbringing, like I feel like flashbacks in a type of sequel would almost work better, kind of going back and forth between kind of like a Godfather Part 2 structure.
Okay.
If you will. And that way, you could kind of see like, who is this person who becomes this spiritual surfing bank robber?
Right.
Now I also think you have the possibility, and maybe this ties into it, but of course, just the other day Saturday, I think it was, or Friday, there was I'm reading this from CNN, a 4-story high rogue wave breaks records off the coast of Vancouver Island.
Oh.
And how only a rogue wave, that the probability of such an event occurring is 1 in 1,300 years.
Wow.
So this
Point Break : Rogue Wave. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Rogue Nation.
Rogue Wave is a cool enough title.
Yeah, no, Rogue Wave would be great. No, I was just thinking about Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation.
Yeah.
So anyway, there have been other, Rogue Waves, but I think this one is might be the largest one. On record. So, but yeah, some idea with like a rogue wave, which I don't know how well, like, I don't think they're that predictable.
Right.
But if you kind of like add a little fiction in there, and you could have it where maybe Utah becomes like one of these like weather, like off the grid weather specialists, and he's like, I'm gonna track these storms and these unique, like, and as climate change of course picks up and we have more extreme weather events happening.
Sure. Well, Dan, there's something that you're overlooking in this, and that's the fact that Bodhi in Point Break out of nowhere predicts that there is going to be this 50-year wave that occurs, that the spirituality behind it, or the legend behind it, is that twice a year there's a wave that the ocean sends us to remind us how insignificant we are, or something like that. And there's definitely some hooey stuff to it. And perhaps there's a way that Bodhi kind of was like, he predicted this thing. It's not like there was some sort of weather thing that was going to tell them that this is going to happen. I mean, clearly it doesn't happen right away after the last time he saw Bodhi. His hair is longer and all it's like time has passed. So there's no way that Bodhi could have predicted on this one day, that there was going to be this wave that happens to be there. So maybe there is a way that we see Utah tossing his badge away, and maybe he does try to like see what Bodhi saw in the universe and like try to get more in touch with like, the balance between man and nature and all this kind of stuff. So,
Red pill or blue pill?
a red pill and blue pill, yeah, baby. So I don't know, maybe there is something to that, because it's like it's set up in the movie that it is possible to have this kind of foresight that such a wave could exist at a certain place at a certain time.
Yeah.
There's nothing scientific about it.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess I had always taken it in the movie that this wasn't something he was just making up, like that he knew. I mean, then again, there really was no like internet in 1991 for him. Maybe he got a newsletter or something.
I don't know. I think that it was just intuition. I don't have the clip pulled or anything, but I feel like there was a... when they're talking about it,
I don't think he necessarily cites data. He just sounds very confident. So I guess I always assumed he had some type of data.
Well, that's the magic of Patrick Swayze right there. You believe it. You believe his words. That's the Manson quality.
That's why we're crazy for Swayze.
Yeah. So
what's your? Is that your?
No. I was just thinking that as you were talking about yours.
riffing.
But I was just riffing, baby. And it's jazz. It's jazz. So what I was thinking is actually going back to what we were talking about with the Fast and the Furious. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fast and the Furious franchise post Fast 5 or whatever. Because after that point, they get linked up, and this is the Dominic Toretto crew. You got Ludacris in there, you got Tyrese Gibson, you've got everybody. The crew just keeps on building and building. Gal Gadot is there at some point, and they are linked by this guy who goes by Mr. Nobody, who is not part of any government agency. Kurt Russell plays him. It's great. And he is the one that essentially like gives them tasks and cars and whatever else they need to catch these like, universe destroying bad guys, essentially, who use cars as their weapons, or, submarines in certain cases. And what I feel needs to be done is to officially link the Fast and the Furious universe and the Point Break universe. Because what we know at the end of Point Break is that Johnny Utah throws away his badge and he just walks away. So, let's say he gets recruited by Mr. Nobody to, really kind of create this new system that kind of is above all other law, that exists not on any like paperwork anywhere, and to get that kind of insight from somebody. And maybe like the whole idea of having the FBI put Brian into the world of Dominic Toretto was like him with like, messing with the puppet strings a little bit. He's manufacturing this world in which this guy in the FBI gets in too deep with this group. And, who better to make that happen than somebody with experience? So Keanu Reeves, we are in the midst of a fantastic Keanu-sance, and I say we keep it going. He's revisiting old franchises, the Bill and Ted franchise, the Matrix franchise. He's, still going forward with, the John Wick universe. Like, he is just, I don't know, pumping them out.
So wait, question. So in your vision, is this like a prequel to Fast and the Furious?
No, I think that this is a continuation of the story from where it is at this point. And we learn that things were put into motion.
Oh, that Johnny Utah has been a part of this from the beginning.
Yes.
Okay, which makes sense, because the first Fast and the Furious is just within 10 years of Point Break.
Yeah.
So, okay. I thought the other way you could go with that is where Johnny Utah is now, like where he has become the leader of a group of thieves, and that's the new Fast 10.
No, because at his core, he still wants the right thing to be done. He does not want there to be bank robberies. He still wants the law to be abided by, but he also understands that there are other ways of, navigating law in order to still believe in something, aside from just, the law.
Right. And to say, like, if you really want to, if you need to go in that deep to bring criminals down, then there really can't be any boundaries or any restraints on you. And maybe he feels like had there not been those restraints of the Bureau on him, that things would have gone differently back in 91.
Of course, because, you got to get things done quickly, and there's budgets and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, let's say Mr. Nobody, it's just like endless resources. So it seems. And it's just like, he's your guy. Johnny Utah. Anyway.
I like that. I like that.
I sometimes a lot of these crazy ass ideas that I have start off as a joke, but then I start to like think about it and like unravel it more and more and more. And it's like,
and it
you
works.
know what? It kind of works.
It works. It does. It does totally work. Wow.
Anyway.
Now I kind of want to see this. I haven't seen Fast 9 yet though, so.
It is wild.
Aren't they all?
Oh, Dan. I wish I could see
the ones I have not seen. I haven't seen, like, I saw the original. I haven't seen Too Fast, Too Furious. I've not seen Tokyo Drift, and I have not seen Fast and Furious. I've seen
Fast and Furious. Is that
was the fourth one?
The fourth one's good. There's some good stuff in there. The second one, there's some good stuff in there. Tokyo Drift is worth seeing so that you're able to make the connections in some of the later ones, and it has its moments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right. That's great. So Point Break, fucking great movie. But
it is.
It's what?
Fantastic.
Like, why don't they it makes me wonder, instead of doing these ridiculous remakes that are just what remake I thought about too with this was the Arthur remake.
Oh yeah.
Which at least bore some resemblance to the original. But I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? It's sad because someday there's going to be some kid who's going to think that they've seen Point Break, and they're going to say, oh yes, I've seen Point Break. And they're going to be talking about this piece of shit and not like the classic, not the original. But yeah, you have not begun to see Point Break, child. Like, war child.
That one's called Point Break Baja Blast. So Dan, do you want to tell everyone what we're doing on our next episode? I dropped in one reference to the title, but it was really shoehorned in there.
It was really but however, it reminded me to do that, so I also made a reference to the title of its sequel as well.
Oh, did you? I totally missed it.
I did. So next up, we are going to be talking about Miss Congeniality and Miss Congeniality 2, Armed and Fabulous.
I haven't seen either of them. Oh my God, my daughter's here and just scared the crap out of me. What's up, kiddo? You gotta go to bed, dude. Okay, why don't you go up there? I'll be up in 5 minutes, okay? So, yeah, no, I haven't seen either of those movies. I'm excited to check them out. Michael Caine is in them?
Michael Caine.
Julie Andrews? Is that right?
No, Candice Bergen.
Candice Bergen. Maybe I'm thinking of Princess Diaries.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Candice Bergen, Michael Caine, William Shatner is in at least the first one.
And of course, Sandra Bullock.
Benjamin Bratt. Yeah. So it's been a while since I've seen either of them. So
I am looking forward to it. And all y'all listening, if you have something you want to add about Point Break or any of the other 154 movies we've talked about on this show, shoot us an email at ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Check out our link tree in the show's description for all of our social media and our TeePublic store. And big ups to our boy Jesse Plemons for that Oscar nom.
Yes!
Buy our Jesse Plemons merch on our TeePublic store.
Hey, get ready for Oscar night. And by Oscar night, we don't mean Oscar Isaac because he was not nominated, but Jesse Plemons sure was. So
that's right.
Get your Jesse Plemons gear and get ready for the Oscars.
Yeah.
So,
well, Dan, as you are chasing a masked bank robber down the streets and back alleys of Los Angeles, I wish you a good journey.
And a good journey to you.